Hey, I need you to lie down for a second. You are on a wooden table. For men you have never met are holding down your arms and your legs, and they are holding hard because they have done this before and they know what is coming. There is a leather strap between your teeth. The man leaning over you has a knife, and he is not going to put you to sleep first because he cannot. Nobody on earth can. It is the year 1500. There is a stone in your bladder the size of a walnut, and the only way it comes out is the way he is about to take it out. Now here is the part that should bother you more than the knife. You are probably going to live. That is the strange thing about ancient surgery. It was not just butchery, some of it worked and worked shockingly well with tools that belonged to a blacksmith and a surgeon who had never heard the word germ. So this video answers two questions. 1. How did anybody survive this? And 2. The one you actually want to know, did they feel all of it? The second answer is worse than you think. To see how deep this goes, we start with a skull. A specific one pulled from the ground in France 7,000 years old. There is a neat round hole in the top of it, the size of a coin. That hole was not made by an axe or an animal or time. It was cut carefully on purpose by another human being while the owner of the skull was alive and sitting upright. It is called trepanation, and it is the oldest surgery we have evidence for, older than the wheel, older than writing. You take a sharp flint or later a small hand drill and you cut through the scalp, then you scrape. And you keep scraping in a slow circle through the bone until you have cut a window clean through the skull down to the surface of the living brain. No painkiller, just a person, a sharp stone, and your head. Picture being the patient. You are awake for every second, and you can hear it. That is the part people forget. Bone does not cut quietly. You feel the pressure, then the scrape, then the grinding traveling through your skull into your teeth for what could be an hour. Somebody holds your head perfectly still because if you jerk, the tool goes too deep. Then the pressure changes. He is through. Now you would assume everyone died. They did not, and we can check. When cut bone heals, the edges of the hole slowly grow smooth and rounded. Dead patients leave sharp edges, survivors leave soft ones. A huge number of these ancient skulls, by some counts more than half, have smooth, healed edges. The patient lived, sometimes for years, and some skulls have 2 holes or 3 or 5 all healed, which means the same person came back, again, on purpose. Sit with that because it breaks something in your brain. Somebody had a hole scraped through their skull, survived it, and later looked at the man with the flint and said, "Yes, do it again." Whatever they thought this fixed, they wanted it fixed badly enough to line up for a second round. So why do it at all? Some of it made real sense. A hard blow to the head makes the brain swell against the skull, and that pressure kills you. Cut a hole, release the pressure, and you might genuinely save the person. They could not explain it in those words, but they noticed it worked. The rest was for things a hole does not fix: headaches, seizures, madness. Evil spirits everyone agreed were trapped in there and needed a door out. Okay, back to you on the table with the walnut in your bladder, because this one was not exotic. Bladder stones were everywhere in the ancient world: bad water, strange diets, and once you had one, you knew. People called the pain worse than childbirth. They would take the knife over living with it. They begged for the knife. The operation was called cutting for the stone, and it barely changed for 2,000 years. They did not open your belly, that was certain death. They went in from below through the perineum, the soft skin between your legs. One deep cut into the base of the bladder, and then the surgeon reaches in with a hook, finds the stone by feel, and pulls it out through the hole he just made, while you are awake, while 4 men hold you exactly where you are imagining. And the man doing it was usually not a doctor. He was a traveling specialist. He rode town to town with a folding table and a roll of tools. He did nothing but stones, and he moved on before anyone could check on the patients he left behind. In some villages, his arrival was an event. People who had been in agony for years came from miles around, lay down in a barn, and waited their turn. Here is what actually kept you alive: speed. There was no anesthetic, so every extra second was pain your body might not survive. People died of the shock alone right there on the table. So the great stone cutters became inhumanly fast. The best went from first cut to stone in hand in under a minute. Fast surgeon, you live. Slow surgeon, you die screaming. There was no third option, and his whole reputation was built on which one you got. And people did live. We know one of them well because he wrote it all down. A man in London, 1658, had a stone the size of a tennis ball cut out of him and survived. He kept the stone. He had it set in a case like a jewel, and every year on the exact date of the operation, he threw a party to celebrate the day a man cut him open and he did not die. He kept that party going for the rest of his life. Now somewhere more delicate, your eye. Live long enough and the lens inside your eye can turn cloudy, a cataract, until the world goes to milk and you go blind. Ancient surgeons had an answer for that too. It is called couching, and I want you to hear how it works. You sit still, fully awake. The surgeon takes a thin needle and pushes it into your eye, not near it, into it. Then he uses the tip to shove the cloudy lens down and out of the way so light can get through again. And it worked, not safely, plenty of people it just blinded for good. But some of them, after a needle was pushed into their open eye with no drink stronger than wine, sat up and could see shapes again where there had been nothing but gray. Imagine holding still for that. Imagine trusting a metal point near your open eye and not flinching, because flinching is the thing that ends it. And if you think this was all crude hacking in the dark, meet the man who ruins that idea. His name was Sushruta in India roughly 2,500 years ago. He wrote a surgical text describing over 300 operations and more than 120 instruments, and trained students to cut with a blade sharp enough to split a single hair. He was doing organized, written-down surgery while most of the world was still guessing. And his most famous operation, we still perform today. To understand it, you need to know a punishment from back then. For certain crimes, and sometimes just the accusation they cut off your nose, it was meant to be permanent. A face everyone could read from across the street, a person marked for life with a wound in the middle of their face and nowhere to hide it. There were a lot of these people, enough that somebody decided to do something about it. Here is what Sushruta did. He cut a flap of skin from the patient's own forehead, folded it down over the hole where the nose had been, keeping it attached by a thin bridge of skin so it stayed alive, and shaped it into a new nose. A living graft from your own body grown into place. It worked so well that 2,000 years later, when British surgeons finally saw it done, they were stunned, wrote it up, and carried the method home. The modern nose job descends directly from it. The oldest operation in the book is still the newest. Now every operation so far has had the same enemy in the background the whole time. It is time to talk about it. Blood. You cannot cut a living person without opening it, and once it is open, it does not politely wait. It floods. The surgeon is racing a clock made of his own patient draining onto the table, and he needs it to stop right now with no clamp and no thread fast enough. So they reach for the one thing that stops bleeding instantly. Fire, cauterization. You heat an iron rod until the tip glows cherry red, and you press it onto the open wound, onto the cut vessels, and the heat seals them shut in a burst of smoke. It stops the bleeding in a second. It is also a burn on top of an open wound on a fully conscious person. Surgeons kept a set of these irons in different shapes, heating in a fire beside the table. The smell was the part apprentices never forgot. And when a limb was past saving, crushed, rotting, poisoned, everything came together into the operation everyone dreads: amputation. The saw, an assistant whose whole job was to hold the patient down and not let go no matter what he heard. And a surgeon who again lived or died by his speed, because the faster the leg came off, the better the odds the person attached to it saw tomorrow. Which brings us finally to the question you have had since the first sentence. They're drilling skulls, cutting for stones, putting needles in eyes, sawing off legs, pressing red-hot iron into open wounds. So did they feel it? Was there some herb, some secret that took the pain away? Everybody hopes the answer is yes. Everybody wants there to have been mercy in that room. Here is the honest answer. Mostly no, there was no mercy. There was a leather strap to bite so you did not break your own teeth, maybe enough wine to make the room spin, and the strong hands holding you down. That was the anesthetic. You were awake. You felt the cut, the scrape, the iron, all of it at full volume, start to finish. The screaming was so much a part of surgery that operating rooms were built far from where other patients could hear. And this is real, some of them tried to fix it. In China, a physician named Hua Chu was said to have mixed a drug called maphase in wine blended with herbs given before surgery to send the patient under. In the Islamic world and later Europe, surgeons used a sleep sponge. A sponge soaked in mandrake, henbane, and opium held over your face until you went limp. And it sort of worked. People really did go under, which sounds like the happy ending to this story. It is not. Because here is the trap. The exact same plants that switched off your pain could just as easily switch off you. There was no way to measure a dose. No scale, no chemistry, no idea how strong this batch of root was compared to the last. The surgeon was pouring a poison into a person and guessing at the line between asleep and dead, a line he could not see and could not test. Think about what was in these mixtures. Mandrake, henbane, sometimes aconite, a plant so toxic a dose smaller than a pea can stop a human heart. Too little and the patient wakes halfway through the operation into the worst thing that has ever happened to them. Too much and they never wake at all, they slide from sleep into death, and nobody in the room can tell which side of the line they are on until it is over. So the grim truth, for most surgeons, most of the time, keeping you awake and screaming was the safer choice. The pain was proof you were still alive. So step back and look at the whole thing. They could drill your skull and you would heal. They could rebuild your face. They could cut a stone out of you in under a minute and you would live to throw a party about it. And yet a soldier could get a shallow cut on his arm, walk away fine, and be dead in a week. How does the same medicine do both? How is it a genius and a fool at once? Here's the answer, and it reorganizes everything you just watched. Ancient surgeons had mastered everything they could see. The The cut, the stone, the bone, the vessel, the flap of skin, visible problems, solved with visible tools by hands that got very, very good at it. But the thing that killed most of their patients was invisible. Infection, bacteria on the blade, on the iron, on the surgeon's own hands, with no concept they existed, because you cannot fight an enemy you do not know is in the room. The knife was never the dangerous part. The knife was the part they understood. That is the real horror of this story, and it is quieter than the screaming. You could survive the impossible operation. You could grit through the saw, the iron, the needle in the eye, and open your eyes the next morning thinking the worst was behind you. And it was not. Something too small to see was already moving through the wound, and no surgeon alive could stop it because none of them knew it was there. They won every fight they could see. They lost over and over to the one they could not. And it stayed that way for an almost unbelievable length of time. The pain problem got solved first. In 1846, a surgeon in Boston finally put a patient to sleep with ether, and for the first time in human history, the screaming stopped. You would think that is when everything got better. For a while, it got worse. Now that surgery was painless, surgeons operated more often, deeper on more people, and still had no idea about germs. More surgery, dirtier than ever, meant more infection and more deaths. The brake had come off before anyone fixed the engine. So go all the way back to the start. Back to you on the wooden table, strap in your teeth, 4 men holding you, the knife coming. Everything about to save you is the part you can see, the surgeon's speed, his steady hand, the tools he knows by feel. And everything that might still kill you is the part nobody in that room can see at all. You are not being asked to survive the knife. You are being asked to survive the coin flip that comes after it. So how did ancient humans survive surgery? Some were tougher than we can imagine. Some had surgeons who were genuinely, astonishingly skilled. And a lot of them honestly just got lucky. They healed before the invisible thing took hold, walked away, and told everyone the surgeon was a miracle worker. The ones who did not walk away could not tell anybody anything. So the stories that survived are the survivors' stories. History heard the party. It never heard the fever. So the next time you are put gently to sleep, and wake up with the problem quietly gone and no memory of any of it, understand what a young, strange gift that is. For almost the entire human story, there was no sleep. There was a strap, a prayer, and speed. Tell me in the comments which of these you could have survived, the drill, the stone, or the needle in the eye. Be honest, and subscribe, because next time we are opening the ancient medicine cabinet. And I need you to understand something before you get there. A lot of the medicine was made out of people.